Hello, hello, hello. All right. Let's check on something. All righty. Hello, hello. It's Tuesday. And it's 7 o'clock. It's time to have some talk. Have a little chat time. So, give me a second. I'll check my sound and some other things. I think my sound is up. Alrighty. Hello, hello. Hey, Tanya. Hello, hello, hello. I think gonna have some new people joining us, so I'm gonna hold on. Try to give it a second. Give it a second here before I kind of get started with this Tuesday talk. Okay. All right, that allows me to see. Okay. Feel like I'm still getting some stuff situated. Okay. Okay. That worked. Okay. So, thank you for those of you who have joined me or who will watch it in the repeat. Or replay, not repeat, replay later on. I like to start out, hey Auntie Karen. I like to start out by introducing myself so that people understand who I am. My name is Tamika Butler. I am, let's see, a retired educator. I was a school counselor for the majority of my years. It was 27 years. I'm a wife, and I'm a mother of 2 kids. And with those 2 kids, I have a 23-year-old and a 22-year-old right now. And the 22-year-old, her name is Kendall, and Kendall is on the autism spectrum, so I'm also an autism parent. And a big reason, why did I start doing these Tuesday chats? I can remember thinking back on our autism journey. And I'm going back to, 2003, because Kendall was diagnosed when she was right under 2 years old. We were very fortunate that we had a diagnosis. So at that time, really kind of hearing about autism, there was really no one talking about autism. So we were hit with something that really and truly no one was talking about. Anything we had to find, we had to kind of go and do some research. And at that point, it was a lot of mixed information that was out there. So you had to listen to the information and then decide what you were going to go with. And so, having said that, we figured our way out and, navigated this autism journey going through from daycare, on through elementary, middle school, high school, and then those post-high school years. And now, we're at that day program because she's 22. And so what I wished we would have had, I wish we would have had someone who was actually having a real conversation with us. Someone who was, being honest, kind of sharing some things, making us think about some things long term. And so one of the things that I decided when I retired was that I wanted to form a consulting company. And I wanted to form this consulting company for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to be able to share information with parents, kind of have that conversation, talk about some things other people weren't talking about. The other thing is I wanted to also be available to provide trainings for schools to help educators, school counselors, front office staff understand more about autism and how to best support students on the autism spectrum, along with businesses. So that was the reason behind Kendall Autism Support and Consulting. So here we are now with these Tuesday chats. I decided it was an opportunity for me to kind of come and talk about different things. And so one of the things tonight I want to hit on, a second, I wish I'd look at my notes so I can make sure I'm paying attention, I have what I want to have. And so one of the things that, a lot of times when you hear about the journey, we hear so much and we know it's so time consuming. Sorry, my phone is just buzzing. Let me see. Give me 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. Sorry. Let me respond to somebody. Just. Okay. Give me a second. Sorry about this. Okay. So, one of the things we hear a lot of information about when we're talking about children on the autism spectrum, we hear parents talk about how, the time and the commitment with a lot of different things. And we know that early intervention is the thing. So with early intervention, that could mean a lot of attention going towards one child. And so when Kendall was diagnosed, here we were once again, it's, 2003, and we had Kendall, we had Julian, and here they are now. They're only really and truly 14 months apart. And so it was very time consuming. We were explaining autism to Julian, and of course he was young and he was still trying to figure out what we were really talking about. But at that point on the autism journey, we were in therapy with Kendall a good, 5 to 6 days a week. And a lot of therapists came to our home, but it was still a big part of that was really our life. Our life was around that therapy schedule and when, they could see her and just trying to keep things going. So we were giving her as much as we could when it came to early intervention. And so, as the therapy began to kind of fall off some, Kendall still had a need for therapy. So we went from 5 to 6 days and it dropped down, but Kendall still needed therapy. And so we have 2 kids and they have 2 different sets of needs. And what I want to, remind parents is that it's really easy to get caught up in taking care of the child that's on the spectrum and forgetting about the siblings. And you want to make sure that you're not forgetting about the siblings. It's so important. And there are going to be some moments where you're going to have to make some hard choices when you think about meeting the needs of your kids. What do I mean by that? Early on in our journey, I mentioned before, Kendall and Julian are 14 months apart. We're talking about early in this journey. She was diagnosed right before the age of 2. And at that point, we're talking about daycares. And so here's the story where we had to really have a heart-to-heart with each other and decide what we were going to do. So when Kendall was diagnosed, she was at a home daycare. Then she transitioned to a daycare. And when she made that transition to the daycare, Julian had already been in that daycare for a year, and then Kendall came that following year. So what happened next was we were still trying to figure out this whole thing with autism. What actually is it? How is it going to impact who she is? What we need to work on, that type of thing. And so we had these therapists. Some of them were coming to our house. We had them now kind of going to the daycare. So it was challenging because the daycare was actually struggling to meet her needs. And so that's really what it was all about. They were struggling to meet her needs. And so two kids 14 months apart, of course, our thought was always they're going to be at the same daycare. They'll be in school together. We're just going to, things are going to be great. We're going to move along this path. Well, imagine one day after, having some calls about some things, and they basically told us they wanted Friday to be Kendall's last day at the daycare. Now, both of us were working at this time, so we had to, first process what was being said, because if I'm correct, it was like a Wednesday that they wanted Friday to be her last day. But then in return, they then said, but we want Julian to stay. So imagine how that felt. You're saying you want one child to cease coming, but you want the other child to stay. And what we had to do was we really had to go sit, and this is where we had to make a hard choice when it comes to siblings. And early on, we had to realize that we had to make sure whatever we were doing, we were thinking about both of their needs, and how both places would not always be able to meet their needs. So when the daycare said they wanted that to be Kendall's last day, that, end of that week, and they wanted Julian to stay, we had to decide what we were going to do. And so what we decided was, we basically decided that we would leave him, and we did. So we left him at that daycare, and we moved Kendall to a new place. And that's a whole journey of how everything went with changing daycares. And really, we were at several daycares with Kendall. But that's a long story. If you get an opportunity, I tell you, read the book, read our story, read our journey, and we talk about that whole thing of when we left the daycare. But we had to make a hard choice right there, early on in this whole movement of things, that one daycare that we really, really liked, because we had done our research on daycares, said, we want Julian to stay, but we really can't meet Kendall's needs, so we want this to be her last week. And at that point, of course, when you tell people, the first thing they say is, I would have snatched out both of my kids. Understand, as an autism parent, people are going to have judgment and tell you what you should and should not do. We had to decide what was best for our family and for our kids. And so we did leave Julian. We left Julian there, and we moved Kendall, and it was hard because every day when we picked Julian up, we had to see the, director of the facility ready to greet us when, you've asked us to remove one of our kids. So that sibling, it's easy to then say we could have snatched them both out and found a daycare that will take them both. But remember, that's going to be 2 spots for 2 kids. But we didn't. And I'm sure some people are thinking, oh, I would have snatched both of my kids. It was really about what was going to meet both their needs. And their needs were different. And so we really and truly had to stop and say to ourselves, what's going to be best for him and what's going to be best for her. So we did. He stayed. We moved her, and her daycare road we changed several times before she started school. However, as Kendall's, continued to move along, and we still had a lot of therapy services, remember, we have the 2 of them, they're 14 months apart. And that meant Kendall was really getting a lot of our attention. As much as we were trying to give him attention, she was getting a lot of our attention. And we had to get creative, because here it was, they're 14 months apart, they're kids. He doesn't really understand everything that's going on. And she's going to therapists are coming to the house to see her. Well, we realized that he wanted someone to see him. And what we were able to do, I had a coworker at that point. We had moved in a different home, and, we were like, maybe we need to get him a tutor to fill in the gap from the move from one school to the other. And she was his tutor. That was the best thing we could have done. He was so excited when I would come and pick him up from school at the end of the day and then take him back so that he could meet with his tutor, because now he was getting a chance to see someone. So here it was, she was getting a chance to see and had been seeing someone since she was 2, several someones with the different therapists. And here it was with him, he now, and so he was in elementary school, he's in 2nd grade. He now, was it 3rd grade, one or the other, but he now was able to see someone on his own. And he would ask, am I going today? Am I going to see her today? And, you know, we did that for a moment. And it wasn't really that he really needed the tutor. We realized he needed his own person to go see. And he didn't need a therapist. It wasn't something that he was dealing with emotionally like that. He really just needed someone that he went to see, that spent some time just with him, where we dropped him off and took her back. Because he had spent a lot of years where we would drop her off and then he and I would go somewhere and then go back and pick her up from therapy. So you really have to take into consideration both of your kids. If you have 2, if you have 3, you've got to take into part their different needs. And when I say take into part their different needs, so we separated them at the daycare at that point. Then moving forward, moving to elementary school, and they were able to come back together. So they were in elementary school together. Because they're 14 months apart, late birthday, the whole thing, they actually are 2 years apart school-wise. But here we were like, yes, they're in the same elementary school, you know, all of that, going from one daycare to the second daycare to pick them up at the end of the day. Whew, we can finally exhale when we're picking up from one place. And we actually managed to do that for the years in elementary school. But because we realized they had different needs, they were no longer in school with each other from that point moving forward. So when Julian left elementary school in 5th grade, Kendall was in 3rd grade. They were never in school together again, even though we never moved, and they're 14 months apart. And the reason is because we could have fought with the system, and I worked in the system. We could have fought with the system to say, hey, this is our home school. We want them to stay in school together, and, you know, you should be able to meet her needs here. But then we had to sit back and say, okay, here's someone that they're actually planning to meet the needs of students on the autism spectrum. And we need to send her what's to the place that's going to meet her needs. And so we did. And they never ended up in school together. You know, from that roller coaster, a whole lot happened. Once again, I encourage you to read our book. It's on Amazon. From when Kendall transitioned to middle school, our life really turned upside down, our world. But, you know, it was something still that we had to make a decision, remembering that we have 2 kids and they have 2 different sets of needs. And that is where you've got to be mindful as an autism parent that people are going to judge you. Because I'm still sure people are still thinking there's no way I would have dropped off one child at the daycare and not the other. But we really and truly had asked ourselves, were they going to meet her needs? And it wasn't going to make any sense to yank him from somewhere he was already used to attending for a year. So stop and ask yourself, what are you doing to make sure you're meeting that other sibling's needs? If it means doing something with them one-on-one, pay attention to what they may need. Because a lot of times they'll operate in silence simply because they don't want to disrupt things. They know things are probably challenging maybe, and there's a lot going on, and they can hear you talking about everything going on. So they don't want to bring up how they're feeling. So I really encourage you to make sure, think about that other sibling. Think about what they need. Think about, you know, as you're talking to them, you're going to have to talk to them more than one time. It took more than one conversation for Julian, you know, to really kind of get a grasp of what autism is. And, you know, it took for him to get older to truly, truly understand. But sometimes you got to get creative. And our creativity worked in, we set him up with a tutor. And because he, you know, felt like he was going to see someone, that really helped him overcome a hurdle. So meeting the needs of both kids may not be ideal, because that then had us at one point at 2 different middle schools, and really it was 3, because I worked at a middle school. He was attending one middle school and she was attending another middle school. And It was all about what was going to meet their needs the best. Could we have fought and said she should be here? We could have. But you have to, really decide sometime what's worth the fight and what's not. And think about what's going to be best for your child. No matter what you do, I can tell you, no matter the choice you make, people are going to judge you. They're going to say what they would have done if they were you, what I would have done if I were in that situation. And it's easy to say what you would do in that situation when you're not in that situation. So be prepared. People still are judging us for things we do. They're going to always judge for something we did or didn't do. However, we have to do what we think is best for her and what's best for our family. So I want you to know, learn to kind of shut out where people are judging you. If you know you're doing the best, then that's all you can do. You can't worry about the conversations of, I would do this, or, oh, he wouldn't be able to do that with me, or if he tried that with me, it wouldn't happen. They're going to have all those things to say because they really don't understand autism and how, what you're doing is purposeful so that they can thrive at their best and be their best, and you can be your best. And so ignore it. Do what's best for you and your family, your children, whatever it is. They may not agree. If it means you're picking up kids at 3 different places, ask yourself, am I meeting all of my kids' needs, or really am I putting everything on one and making everybody adapt? So keep that in mind as you're moving through this journey. And so I went through that talking about the sibling because it's one of those things that comes up quite a bit with when people ask us about the two of them, because they are 14 months apart. And we, share that story because we can then see what people are thinking. However, it then made me realize, as I made that pivot and retired and started this consulting company, one of the things I wanted to do was be of service and provide a service. And so one of the things I've noticed is that when parents receive a diagnosis for autism, it's a lot going on. It's a lot. It's information. They're trying to figure it out. And I always tell everybody, please don't Google, because if you Google autism right now, it's so much information, you're going to be overwhelmed. So imagine that parent with a new diagnosis, and they have all these questions themselves. I mean, it's just a lot going on. They're trying to figure out what the school is saying, what they need to do, how can they get some routine and everything set up in their house. It's so much. And then you have this caring grandparent who really wants to help. Hey, sister, who really and truly wants to help their child. Well, imagine that parent really seems like, I can't spend my time talking to you. I just don't have it in me to have this conversation and explain everything to you right now. Well, understand, they're not being mean. It's just they have so much going on. I say all of that to say, one of the things that I have upcoming is a grandparent boot camp. And that's because I want to make sure grandparents understand autism, understand how they can support their grandchild, understand some of that new lingo, their daughter or son may be talking as they talk about their grandchild, and how they can all come together, but take that part away so they're not having to go to their daughter or son and ask all these questions because they really want to know and they really want to help. So one of the things I have coming up, because I really and truly want to help grandparents, and really I'm saying grandparents, but it's grandparents and it could be aunts or uncles as well. It's anyone really that's not the parent. And explain to them what autism is. Explain to them how executive functioning skills play a big part into, how things are. Explain to them that with some kids with autism, some kids may have an intellectual disability and some kids may not. Kendall has an autism diagnosis and she has an intellectual disability diagnosis, and how that's different and how we have to do different things or whatever to make sure she understands what we're talking about. So I really and truly, encourage you, if you know someone, a grandmother or aunt, and they need to know. I know a lot of times we see grandparents in schools raising grandkids, and they're asking you all a lot of questions. This is an opportunity. They can go to my website, www.kendallkendallasc.org, for this boot camp. The boot camp, I'm looking at a calendar if you see me looking up. This boot camp is going to be on December the 2nd, and it's for 3 hours. Now, it's going to be 3 hours where they're able to gather information, hear some other grandparents talk about maybe some things they put in, place in their home or whatever, how they're handling, learning about their grandchild being on the autism spectrum, because for some reason, when people hear autism, they almost act like the person has cancer. And it's really not the same, but that's how some people take autism and cancer, and they kind of put it together like it's a death sentence. It's so not. So we want to make sure they understand. And if you know someone, encourage them to go to our site for that boot camp. Yes, there's a fee attached, but you got to ask yourself, if I want to, be of service, how much am I willing to give to make sure I can meet that need? And that's just life in general. So that's one thing that's coming up on the 2nd of December. Now, the other thing that's starting up in December as well is, I see where she says she missed the website. I think my sister's still on here. If she could put the website in, or my Auntie Karen. One thing for sure, another thing is a 6-week parent course. And so right now I do a free consultation, kind of talking to parents. And I know a lot of times some of the questions, some of the things they want to talk about, they just need to deal with, have absolutely nothing to deal with if I call the doctor. They're not going to really be able to give you an answer. They need to talk to someone who understands, who can actually say, I get it. And when I tell people I get it, I've dealt with aggression. I've dealt with a lot. We've dealt with a lot with Kendall, but we've had a lot of great moments as well. And so having said that, one of the things in particular is that with this 6-week parent group, it'll be 6 live sessions, so you can do it in the comfort of your home. And it will come with a consultation on the front end, because I want to know what your specific needs are as we move forward and I shape the group. And it's going to be a small group. And then a consultation on the back end, so that we can put a plan together of how you can do things moving forward, along with, I'm going to follow up with you in about 30 days after that to see how things are going, because my goal is really success. So, a couple of things happening. If you joined me, thank you very much. I see a lot, some different names in the comment section I haven't seen, so thank you for joining me. I do this every Tuesday, and I tell everyone I do it Tuesday at 7 o'clock, because I want to be of service where it didn't exist for us. We did a lot of, research and reading, a lot of books to get some answers, and sometimes it was the right answer, and sometimes it may have been the wrong answer. And we were sometimes just trying to figure it out the best way we could, because we were dealing with adults as well who really didn't fully understand as we were moving through the school system. They didn't understand, not because they didn't want to know. They just didn't know, because no one was providing that training, which unfortunately is still kind of happening. But keep all those things in mind. Going back again, I am I always say, let me introduce myself again, Tanika Butler. And I'm a wife, 25 years. So that's also part of it, trying to maintain a working relationship, whether you're still with the partner or not. And I am a retired teacher and school counselor, 27 years. And we have 2 kids together, a 22-year-old and a 23-year-old. And so our journey has been an interesting journey, but it's a journey that I want to share. And so make sure, if you didn't get a chance, that you're able to join me next week. Also, the comment section, thank you, sister. She posted the website about the grandparent boot camp. It's an opportunity that, from working in the school, I would hear a lot of people say, I wish someone could talk to this grandmother. She has all these questions. She's asking me all these questions because she's raising her grandkids. And of course, that teacher would say, I just don't have the time. I can't answer all of her questions. They weren't being mean. They really just didn't have the time. That's what this boot camp is about. Some of those questions they want to ask, let's get them answered so that they're able to just come back and support, and not still have to keep hitting the parent or hitting the teacher trying to get answers to questions because they just don't understand. So share it with some grandparents if you work in the school system, and let them know it's virtual. They can join from their couch. They can get their grandkid to sit there with them if they're not sure about how to get on Zoom. It's an opportunity to bond. But that's what it's all about for my years working in the school system and my years as a parent, that I know something, giving information to grandparents and aunties and uncles is a great thing. And make sure you share that information. Now, one of the things I'm going to close out with, and I'll always close out with, is to make sure for those loved ones who are raising individuals on autism spectrum that may have an intellectual disability, please make sure you get our babies a state ID. I cannot say that enough. The same way we make sure at 15 kids get that learner's permit, check to see what you need to do to get them a state ID. Look into it. They want a state ID the same way. Stop using the school ID and, letting that be that only ID. Get them a state ID so they can have an ID that looks just like your ID. It does not matter their intellectual level. They can still get a state ID. Just look into your state and see what the requirements are. It's one of those things that we've got to do better about, and we owe it to them to get them a state ID as well. The same energy and effort we put into getting that learner's permit, we've got to put into getting those state IDs. So if you know someone, remind them, hey, that state ID, have you gotten it? And ask them so they can move forward with it. That's my other thing. My only thing is, once again, there's a workbook I have available, and it's on my website as well. But that's for another day. So remember the sibling. That's where I started, and that's where I'm going to end. Remember the sibling. Remember that sometimes you got to get creative in meeting their needs, but you still got to make sure you're meeting all of their needs. And I know that may seem like a lot, depending on the number of children you may have. But you want to make sure you're meeting their needs. Pass this on, share, tag. Also have people as well. I have a business page that, I'm sharing information on a little more regularly. And it's videos there as well. But the whole point is, for me, is to get information out there. When something crosses my mind, I try to say, okay, let me stop at some point today and make a video so that the information is there if someone is looking for it. So earlier this week, I talked about consistency and what that actually means and what that means you should do, which is a big difference than just telling somebody you need to be consistent at home. People need to know what you mean by that. So thank you once again for joining me tonight. Share the information, share the post, tag some people. It's all about making sure we're coming together, we're educating ourselves so that we have a more inclusive society, and that parents who are raising kids on the autism spectrum do not sit at home, that they're bringing their kids out and about, because the more we educate everyone, the more everybody's going to be more comfortable and knowledgeable, and it will no longer be something that people feel as if they've got to hide, and because there are still people that feel like they have to hide it. So have a great one, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your night. And as people say, I'll see you in these Facebook streets, I'm sure probably tomorrow. Talk about something else. Have a great one.